Good afternoon. This is the Torah on Megillas Ruth, which is read on Shavuos morning. The obvious connection between the two is the Torah represents Chesed, and Shavuos is the day of Matan Torah, and therefore, as the Torah's Chesed, manifestation of that is in the whole story of Megillas Ruth. And the story is fairly well known, and Ruth was one of the progenitors of Davidic dynasty. And what I would like to do is talk about one aspect of the Megillah. It's based on partially on the commentary of the Ramchal, uh, and I'd like to focus on the first few verses of the Megillah, and it says, "V'hi b'mei shoftim, he rava ba'eretz v'nelech ish mebeis lechem Yehuda, l'mor b'shadai, u'b'shadai shadei Moav, he ishto and shnei banav. And the shem of the ish Elimelech, the shem of the ishto Naomi, the shnei banim banav Machlon and Kilion, Ephratim the base Beit Lechem Yehuda, and Vo Shadei Moav Hayusham, and translates basically as, now it came to pass in the days when judges judged. I mean, the most normal understanding of that is that judges were judged by the people. There was a famine in the land, and a man went from Beit Lechem of Yehuda to live in the fields of Moab, he and his wife and two sons. And a man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi, and his two sons were Machlon and Kilion. Ephraiters from Beit Lechem, Yehuda, and they came to the fields of Moab and remained there. Now, just to complete the story, then it goes on to say that Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she left two sons, and they married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth, and they dwelt there for about 10 years, and Machlon died, and one was left bereft. Now, question that's asked by the Ramchal is, the wording's a little strange, as we know nothing in Tanakh or the Chumash is extra. That being the case, why do we have extra language here? Because it says, first says that this man, woman, and two sons went to sojourn in Moab, which was a very great enemy of the Jewish people. I don't want to draw the analogy too close, but it would be like today, the top rabbi, his wife, and two sons moving over to Iran. And in other words, it's the serious enemy of ours. And the Rumps, it could have been written differently, because you could have simply put in the two verses into one, and they could read, there was a famine in the land, and Elimelech went from Beit Lechem Yehuda to sojourn in the fields of Moab. He and his wife Naomi and his two sons Machlon and Kilion. So why this? Why do we repeat that? What seems to be the same thing, and just give them names? Now, the Ramchal, and what I'm giving is not Derek Bashat, literal meaning. It's Derek Remez, which means illusion. and has to understand that why this strange wording? Because the wording, first sentence, is not talking about um, Elimelech, Naomi, and Machlon and Kilian. Who was it talking about? Moshe Rabbeinu, Zipporah, his wife, and the two sons. Now, why in the middle of the story of Megillas Ruth, beginning actually, would such a thing be introduced? Before I come back to answer that, I'm going to explain more what the Ramchal has to explain about Megillas Ruth, and it goes on. It goes like this: on a deeper level, who does Elimelech represent besides himself? He was one of the Shoftim judges. Now, any of the Shoftim, as well as the Davidic kings that came later through Ruth, any of them could have become Mashiach if they had merited and the people had merited it. Didn't ultimately happen. Eventually, the first temple fell. But there was always that potential there. Now, who does Naomi represent in this? She represents Knesset Israel. Knesset Israel can be understood on a couple levels. Sometimes it's referring to Hashem's quality of the Shekhinah. It can also, in this case, be revealing to Jewish people, congregation of Bnei Israel. And who does Machlon represent? He represents Meshach ben David, because of concerning opinions, the child that belonged to Boaz and Ruth was actually a Gilgal reincarnation of Machlon. Now, who does Kilian represent? He represents Meshach ben Ephraim, descended from Yosef. Now, according to the understanding, Meshach ben Ephraim will do the ingathering of the Jewish people. And it says, later on, it says it said in Sefer Vayikra that he will die over living waters. And then after that ingathering will be Meshach ben David. And what will his job be? Is to do spiritual battle, not physical battle, spiritual battle with all the nations of the world that show all their spiritual, economic, emotional ideas and false gods are just that, and they'll come to a belief in one God. Now, that's all very interesting. What does that have to do with Ruth? Now, our exile, the Ramchal goes on to explain, our exile has been extremely long. I'm talking the fourth exile, Asim and Rome. It's going on almost 2,000 years. And the concern was, and part of the Hashem's divine plan, that even the promise of Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Ephraim would not be enough to sustain the Jewish people. And this is where Ruth comes in. And because the concept, something else was needed to keep the Jewish people going for 2,000 years. And Ruth represented that quality. Now, how does this work? She was descended from Lot and his daughters, as this story is known. And Lot's daughters thought they and her father were the only survivors, so they made him drunk. And one daughter, the older daughter, had relations with him, and a child was conceived from that. And the younger daughter was with him the next night. He wasn't aware of what was going on. and conceived a child from him. Now, why was this unnecessary? In fact, two nations were descended from them. They're enemies of Israel. So why was it necessary? Well, we have to look back a little. Lot was the nephew of Avraham Avinu. Now, Avraham Avinu, great quality was chesed, and there are signs of that if you look at the fact that he represents chesed. I'll be speaking more about some later about Borum Porsche's Naso. One of the gematrias of chesed. This name Yud Vav comes out in 5 different spellings, and which I'm not going to go into now. That comes to the number 130, and that's one factor. And his main quality was chesed. This is shown in many ways. So the seeds of that chesed, the spiritual genetics, spiritual DNA of that chesed went to Moab, Ammon, the other nation. And these two nations had to be sustained so that those spiritual genetics could eventually be covered by the Jewish people. Now, so therefore, Ruth possessed those qualities. And chesed, if you look, an overwhelming underlying thing linking the Jewish people is chesed. Not only is it the theme of Shavuos, but it that represents chesed. In fact, there was one story I heard. This I was told that this Rav's daughter in America, and they had this Italian neighbor, and you notice every time he got into the car, he put on a black suit jacket, white shirt, and wore a black hat. He was Jewish. So this Robinson father asked why. And the answer that was given, he said, every time somebody is dressed like that Jew and he's stuck on the road or he has some other problem, somebody will always come to help him. And he said, if I'm ever in that situation, I want them to think I'm Jewish so I can get that help. Now, it's an inherent quality of us. I could spend hours talking about that, but we show chesed through tzedakah, helping each other many, many ways. And this is the quality that had to be brought in to strengthen us. Now, and therefore, Ruth brought that spiritual genetics back to us. Now, what about the other daughter, descendants? How did she get back into the Davidic dynasty? Because Naamah was the wife of Shlomo Melech. He had quite a few of them that provided the next Davidic king. And that's how that got introduced back into the Jewish people, was through her. And by the way, there's two Naamahs, not to be confused with the one that was that appeared in Parshas Bereshit and Parshas Noach, who was the wife of Noach. And therefore, this was to complete and provide the structure we need to survive to these times when we're Nekav Mashiach, to allow us to survive. Now, this is taking all this together. That still raises the question: why are we talking? Why would the first pasuk be talking about Moshe Rabbeinu? Because, and the Ramchal and everybody agrees with this, it says that Moshe will lead the people at the time of Mashiach. Now, And therefore it was referenced because the only way that members of the generation of the desert, who were all died in the desert, could come in was with the merit of Moshe. But it goes deep in that. Once he's in Eretz Israel, seems as the source suggests that the redemption is going to come through him. Now, according to the Ramchal, after David Melech cleans up the whole situation with the world, you all return to belief in one God, um, Moshe Rabbeinu will become king. Now, of course, there's some people, not everybody agrees with that interpretation. On a deeper level, and Moshe comes present in hidden form every generation. He's the Shorish Neshama, the sole source of all the Neshamas, the Jewish people, and therefore he couldn't really be Mashiach because Mashiach has to come from the tribe of Yehuda, and he was from the tribe of Levi. And according to that interpretation, he is producing the potential that will become Mashiach ben David. Some sources say it will be a descendant of David. Others say it will be reincarnation, Gilgal of David himself. Now, as we are about to enter Shavuos, and we're in very incredible times now, should we claim that Hashem has taken, guided us, and cared for us? There are many things in Megillas Ruth, I don't know, that beyond the scope of this Torah, to show that love and that caring, and how the whole way that the marriage of Ruth and Boaz occurred was obviously divinely designed. And may we keep that in mind. We emulate the quality of Ruth, which was chesed, and may this year be a year of growth in chesed and in Torah, and in light of that, in Shavuos, we may soon merit the redemption. Good Yontif.